Hello, Culture Matters podcast. Boy, am I excited to introduce you to our guest. You know them well, but you're going to know them even more well. Here's a quote before I introduce them. Either write something worth reading or do something worth writing. Benjamin Franklin. Our guest today is and has done both. They've written books, authored books, and have and are doing something worth writing about now and someday. They're a good friend of the Culture Matters podcast. They're a good friend to me. You know me, Jay, a mentor, a leader, a servant leader, just an all around amazing person whose family has touched my life and I hope yours through the show in my growth. Christopher Vester, thanks for coming back to the Culture Matters podcast. We're going to talk about in these series Answers from the Stairs, a book he's authored, and why I picked that quote. Someone that's putting out content into the world and building a legacy with the Hubert Vester Auto Group and changing lives that day. So that's why I picked that quote. Thanks for coming on the show and talking with us about one of your newer books, Answers from the Stairs.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate all that kindness and encouragement. I hope I can truthfully exude that over the course of time.
Heck yeah. And so my fierce curiosity is, what is Answers from the Stairs?
Huh. It's I would say probably the best analogy is a true meaning of personal development. So the idea, I was doing Instagram, back then it was called IGTV. That was before they actually came up with the reels, right? I had been challenged into putting some content out there by the guy that was handling our marketing. And I was at a loss as for what to do. And, but I got up every morning and I would go down and get on the stair mill and like get some cardio in. And while I was doing it, I was always reading or listening to a book or listening to a podcast or listening to something. Right? There's always something in my ears, not music. And because I found that I absorbed information better if I'm under some physical stress. And I took a picture of my stair mill one day and I said, I heard those answers at the top. And the whole joke of that is, like, on a stair mill, you never get to the top. So do you ever really have the answers? And so that's what I decided to call the Instagram TV series, was Answers from the Stairs. And so the theme of it was I would get off the stairs and immediately just record my thoughts whenever I had been studying or whatever was in my brain from just my thirst for personal growth and development. So Answers from the Stairs is, hey, the answers are at the top of a stair mill, which, like, you never really get there.
What year was that?
2018. The first episode was July the 3rd, I believe, of 2018.
Wow.
I did it 5 days a week, and ended up with 340 some episodes over the course of it. Lots of staring at a camera, recording my thoughts. It was just, and I actually shared the fruit of that project with someone yesterday. We kind of walked back to when that started, and then the relationships that came from that project, and even the fruit of the book, like how so many things that are in my life today I can attribute back to that project. People, relationships, more than people. It's not just people, it's the relationships that I've built through legitimately that project.
What were the first 10 episodes like?
Scary, terrible. They were, in fact, I think if I go back and look at the first episode, I talk about the fact that I recorded one the day before and my battery was dead. So like the first attempt was a complete failure. So yeah, it was just it was real. right? I had no idea what I was doing.
Hmm.
And felt completely unqualified to be even having the conversations. But what I did know was, hey, I can at least talk about my thoughts. That doesn't mean that I'm right. It means, hey, this is something I've heard and this is what I think about it. And like, let's have some dialogue around it. Um, and the majority of the dialogue that came from the back end. It's amazing. One of the things I learned is nobody wants to have open dialogue. They don't want to talk out in public and talk about things or struggles or even their opinions. They would
Wow.
rather send you a direct message and talk about it in secret. And I guess one to one. But like I said, those one to one dialogues are what created, I mean, dozens of great influential relationships in my life. Um, to some degree, Jay, you and I are a product.
Yeah, it was just hitting me as you were talking. I'm like,
I mean,
holy cow.
right? Because we had connected very quickly, briefly on Facebook because of a shared relationship we had. A guy that was a salesman for a vendor we used, and he said, "Hey, you've got to, as much as you talk about culture, like you really need to get to know Jay Doran, the culture man." And he's like so I sent you a message, and that's because I'm never afraid, right? And so
Yes.
it that this the product of it is this the relationship that you and I have. I mean, dear friends,
Huh.
I mean,
Wow.
confidants, and you know, I mean, it's amazing. It's really like
I don't want to digress, but I am going to project for a second. I'll beat myself up about this later, but I'm thinking, why did I ever stop doing all that stuff? And because right, we met because both of us at that time were putting out who we were to the world.
right.
So I'll beat myself up about that when we hang up here. What? How long did it take to start getting those DMs where people were responding to you and resonating with who you were?
Um, man. So one of the what I'll say one of the root relationships started. My first episode was July the 3rd, and I went back and looked, and it was September the 6th that I did an episode about a podcast of a gentleman that has become a dear friend of mine. Um, and that was September the 6th that like we engaged. So that was September the 6th of 2018. And in November, we were in Nicaragua on a mission trip together.
Wow.
We were literally doing life together. Um,
Wow.
and it was just about, you know, sharing each other's life, like sharing successes, sharing how things were working in a great way, sharing struggles, asking for help. Like it was, um, but that one relationship has been a catalyst for a multitude, you know.
What do you say to the person listening that has apprehension to get started, that there's a level of interest to start putting themselves out there through social media? They have an interest in doing it, maybe business wise, personal. I would like to unpack the value on each of those, but
Sure.
what do you say the apprehension?
Um, like we live in a state of fear of man. Like we fear men's opinions. We fear sharing like our visions because what if two things could happen? Either the vision could be exactly what we think it will be and it creates success and that can make us a slave to that vision, or the vision fails and then we're seen by others as a failure. When I when I dissect that with other people, that's the two things they kind of boil it down to. Well, if it's successful, then I'm a slave. Well, no, that just means you've got to put new systems and processes in place to not be a slave to whatever that vision of success looks like. And then the other side is what if it fails? Well, you figured out one way it doesn't work. So we live in that fear, and
Hmm.
then understanding that hey, both of those results are great results. So go into it knowing and saying to yourself, either success or failure is a great result. Because if it fails, you just figured out a way it didn't work. Um, And the idea, I don't know that I necessarily believe in an imposter, quote unquote, imposter syndrome. I said I felt like an imposter. I don't know if that's a syndrome or not.
Yeah.
It was just the fact that in that moment, like I thought, why would anybody want to hear what I have to say? Like what influence do I really have other than my immediate circle, right? Meaning my family, not even employees. Like I was just like shrinking my influence down to the smallest common little circle. Why would it matter? And then having some criticism from inside the organization of they didn't like the way it was making the organization look because I was being so transparent and so vulnerable about our struggles. Like if something didn't work and we stumped our toe, or even worse, if I stumped my toe, then I would talk about it. And their feedback to me was not everybody needs to know where we're failing. But on the backside of those videos, I was getting conversation about, hey, we had that same problem one time and here's what we did. So it wasn't about like I was getting help from people I'd never met. And because of just saying, hey man, this is just life. Like it brought on this whole set of mentors, coaches, guides that just were willing to say, hey, here's how it worked for us. So I don't think it was a detriment. So like you have this idea that why would anybody care what I have to say? Well, you never know till you try, you know, it's what I'm trying to teach our variable side, our salespeople right now is where I'm starting with it. But what if everybody that walked in our doors specifically came and asked for a particular salesperson because they had seen so much of their content online that they felt like they know them and they trust them and they like them. So they came in and asked for them. What if 100% of the clients that came in asking for somebody specific? Like that is I know that's a big, huge rainbow dream, but that's how I see our business moving forward. Is I want every single person that comes in to be attached to somebody that they know, like, and trust just because of the way we're putting their voice out there in space.
I was going to ask what could be some of the business benefits of putting oneself out there.
Yeah. I talk about sales, but we see 40 times, well, not quite. We see about 30 times the number of customers through service that we do in sales every day. And that's typical in this space. And so if our service advisors would do the same thing and just start creating content about who they are, what drives them, what makes them want to come to work every day, what makes them want to work here, why would they choose us over anybody? Well, if they start putting that out there, then the customers start to understand what sets us apart and makes us different, and they begin to trust the person that's just being honest and transparent. Because you can only fake it for so long. I had a conversation with somebody and said, dude, the fact that you did it for 300 plus episodes lets you know it has to be you, because you can only fake that stuff for so long. And you did it for every day for 2.5, almost 3 years, So
how did you say it's impacted your life?
Oh man. It's made me completely, I'll say completely acceptable to the idea of just be who I am. The idea, when I introduce myself, I use a statement of being a bold man who acts with integrity and from love, standing as a beacon to God's grace and mercy. That's how, if they stand above my box at the end of my life, and that's what they say about me, I will feel like I lived a life fulfilled. Well, that whole part of living with integrity means there's only one you. There's the same person at work that there is at home, that there is at the bar, at church, wherever you are. It's just one person. And it's led me to be super integrous with how I show up. Like I don't know that I ever changed a lot, but I'm sure there was some difference between who I was at home and who I am at work. But it's given me that freedom to be okay with that. And by doing that, the people that have become part of my circle and the introductions that have come to that and the opportunities that have come from that, and the ever expanding opportunities that have come in from that, because there's a like mindsetedness, because I'm just being who I am vocally, like showing up the same way everywhere. I went from sending a DM to a guy who had an amazing podcast about his faith and showing up as a lighthouse. And then within 5 years of that conversation, I'm sitting in a room with David Green, the founder of Hobby Lobby. And if I trace that moment of being in the room with my dad and my wife, with the founder of one of the most successful companies on the planet, if I trace the line of that back all the way, it goes back to that one DM on September the 6th, 2018. So you can only, I think you say it, Kierkegaard talks about, it can only be live forward and examine backwards. If I turn around and look and glance back at, hey, how did I get to this spot? It's glaring that how I got here was just being transparently and vulnerably exactly who I am and letting people know. So massive impact. Even like I said, the book would have not have happened had it not been for the videos.
What do you talk about? For the listener thinking, well, what the heck was 300 plus? Where did you get your topic? What did you talk about? Where did you get your topics?
A lot of it came from me. So they kind of boiled down to the same things that I see as the areas that I focus on the most in my life. I've got this, octopuses are my thing, right? And there's a whole episode of that about the octopus, but those 6 out of the 8 arms of the octopus that I spend most of my time developing and trying to serve better, my faith, my family, my mind, my body, the success of the business, and the circle of influence that I have, like those became the topics that I discussed the most, because those were the things that I was trying to develop the most. And the content came from me doing research about some of those, like those things. I mean, when it comes to faith, it could be a sermon that I listened to, or the sermon that my pastor gave on Sunday and I talked about it on Monday, or my Bible devotion that morning. I mean, there's just something that sparked something in me that I decided, hey, let's talk about that, or I'm going to talk about that and let's see if somebody responds. When it came to my family, I would talk about the successes of habits that we had created and how they had served us. Even like picking a word for the year, like there was one year that my word was intentional. Like I wanted to be intentional in every place that I was. Like be where my feet are. Jesse Itzler has that quote, be where your feet are. So I made that year, it's like I really wanted to be in every instance super intentional. So I began to document time with my kids differently, not doing it for the gram. I just want to make sure I was capturing a ton of it. Well, that was Avery's senior year of high school. And through the process of being really intentional, what I recognized is, man, I really documented her senior year of high school and the launch to college ridiculously well, because I thought I'm going to be intentional. Body, I mean, I was on the stairs, but even going through things like 75 hard discipline challenge and training for 29 to 29, the Everesting challenge, like any type of physical challenge I would put in front of me, I would kind of go through why I did it, what I got from it, where I failed it. Like, so each one of those things, those 6 of the 8 arms were where I was trying to develop consistently all the time, because they kind of stay in my life. Those are the 6 things that I see, like just they're going to be with me forever. That's why they're in my tattoo. But yeah, so just studying those things.
How long for each one?
My goal was 3 to 5 minutes. The longest one I did was, I think, 17 minutes.
Wow.
That was unpacking. I did one that was unpacking my trip to Nicaragua. That was a long episode. And really, it was more of a combination because while I was in Nicaragua, it was hard to, I mean, I didn't have as much service, so I was still recording them. So I kind of combined them all into one of this, 4-day trip. So that was 17 minutes. And there were a couple that, like I unpacked, the first 75 days of 2020 were impactful because it was right before the world shut down. The world shut down on March the 15th, which was the 75th day of 2020. That was the last day of me completing 75 hard with 4 other guys as a discipleship group. And we named ourselves 75 Hard and Faithful because we made faith a part of it. And we had planned to go on a mission trip in April. Like everybody had their tickets, like everything was ready to go. But those 75 days were, being able to document those and they became a longer episode, because it was 75 days of this thing that we did. So rather, I mean, I did do the videos every day, but then kind of at the end of it, it's right into COVID. Like it's legit in the beginning of what in the world's happening to the world. And, which made that first 75 days really relevant, of being able to discipline yourself in the mental space really well.
What's the reason our listeners would benefit from tuning into Answers from the Stairs podcast and picking up the book?
So the book is a combination of a lot of episodes. That's how we kind of put the book together, which is going back and looking at the episodes and seeing how many of them had some of the same common theme and then turning that into chapters. So I think looking at each chapter, there's going to be for sure takeaways. And the podcast, I think it's going to be interesting to see, looking back at 6 years later, of advice I was giving or advice I was seeking, how much of it have I solved? And then how much of it that I was giving because of how we had solved issues, I either still agree with or have changed my mind on. Because the idea Answers from the Stairs, you never get to the top, but there's an ever evolving thought process of how you handle problems, how you fit into situations, how you grow. Like it's like ever evolving. So looking back at those and say, I'm still 90% where I was then, but this is one thing I see differently. Or listening to it and go, man, could I have been any more stupid or ignorant or uninformed or, arrogant in some cases to think that way. But I think that in and of itself would be content that would be challenging to someone that would listen to go, hey, let's see how someone else has evolved. He was transparent then, he's going to be transparent now. Let's see what the results of that is.
In closing, what's your call to action to our listeners?
Hopefully go buy a book. It's on Amazon, Answers from the Stairs. And the end of it, there's a QR code that you can scan and it'll keep you informed of what's next. Meaning like when new content comes out, when the podcast comes out, when there's another book released maybe. But the book would be one place to go. And follow me on Instagram or some type of social because I'm really active there. And that's probably the easiest place to get in touch with me.